What you're about to witness isn't just courtroom drama. It's political detonation. A 47-year-old city councilman walked into Judge Frank Caprio's courtroom for a simple parking ticket and walked out with his entire career in ashes. He came in thinking his title made him untouchable, threatening to have the judge removed, boasting about his power, unaware that the man sitting behind the bench had already been listening for 3 months. Because Judge Caprio wasn't just hearing his excuses, he was holding evidence, a secret wiretap, a recording of this same politician plotting bribes, deals, and threats behind closed doors. And when that recording played in open court, the mask fell. What followed didn't just end one man's career. It exposed a web of corruption that had poisoned the very core of Providence politics. This isn't just justice served, it's justice remembered. A warning to every official who thinks power is protection, and a tribute to a judge who proved that integrity can still silence intimidation. So before we dive into this historic courtroom takedown, and in Judge Frank Caprio's courtroom, principle always wins. Hit that subscribe button because this story about holding corrupt
politicians accountable deserves to reach everyone who believes elected officials should serve the people, not themselves. It's a Tuesday morning in March, and Providence Municipal Court is preparing for another session. But today is different. Today, Judge Frank Caprio isn't just handling routine cases. He's been working with the FBI Public Corruption Unit and the Rhode Island Attorney General's office for 3 months, building a case against one of Providence's most powerful city councilmen. At exactly 10 a.m., the courtroom doors swing open with the kind of authority that makes everyone turn to look. In walks Councilman Anthony "Tony" Duca. And this man doesn't just enter a room, he owns it. Or at least he thinks he does. Duca is 47 years old, dressed in an expensive Italian suit that screams power and money. His salt and pepper hair is perfectly styled, his Rolex Presidential gleams on his wrist, and diamond cufflinks catch the courtroom lights. He walks with the swagger of someone who's used to getting his way, someone who believes his political position makes him untouchable. Behind him walks his attorney, Vincent Romano, a high-priced lawyer known for representing Providence's political elite. Romano carries a leather briefcase and the confidence of someone who's gotten powerful clients out of trouble many times before. But here's what Duca doesn't know. Sitting in the back row of the courtroom, dressed in plain clothes and looking like just another observer, is FBI Special Agent Catherine Morrison. And in the row behind her, pretending to review case files, is Assistant Attorney General David Chen. They're not here to watch. They're here to arrest. Duca makes his way to the defendant's stand with casual arrogance, nodding at a few people in the gallery who he recognizes from city government and business circles. He's fought tickets before, usually with a phone call to someone at City Hall. This should be simple. Councilman Anthony Duca, the court clerk announces, her voice carefully neutral. Case number MC 20246892. Parking in a fire lane at City Hall. Fine, $200. Duca steps forward with a smirk. Your Honor, Councilman Anthony Duca, representing Ward 5 on the Providence City Council for the past 12 years. I'm here regarding what I believe is a misunderstanding about designated parking at City Hall. Judge Caprio looks up from his paperwork, and his face remains completely neutral. But those who know him, well, recognize something in his eyes. A readiness, a sharpness. This isn't going to be routine. Councilman Duca, Judge Caprio begins. You're charged with parking in a clearly marked fire lane at City Hall for over 2 hours. Can you explain what happened? Duca's smirk widens. Your Honor, as an elected member of the City Council, I have certain operational needs that sometimes require parking in locations that provide immediate access to City Hall. I was attending an emergency budget meeting, and the regular parking was full. The fire lane was the most practical option given the urgent nature of city business.
So you decided that because you're a councilman, fire safety regulations don't apply to you? Your Honor, I think there's a misunderstanding about how city government operations work. Elected officials often need flexibility in these matters to serve constituents effectively. Judge Caprio sets down his pen deliberately. Councilman Duca, were you responding to an actual emergency, fire, medical crisis, anything that would justify blocking emergency vehicle access? Duca's irritation starts to show. Your Honor, city business is always urgent when you're serving 35,000 constituents. Every meeting I attend is important. That's not what I asked, Councilman. Was
there an emergency that justified blocking a fire lane? Duca exchanges a glance with his attorney, Romano, and you can see the calculation in his eyes. He's deciding whether to continue with polite excuses or to play his political card. Your Honor, I've been on the city council for 12 years. I've worked with 4 different mayors. I chair the budget committee, which oversees this court's funding. I think we can handle this situation with some mutual understanding of how city government operates. The courtroom goes very quiet. Duca has just implied that he controls Judge Caprio's budget and expects preferential treatment because of it. And guys, if you're watching this thinking this politician just made a huge mistake, hit that like button now, because what Judge Caprio is about to reveal will show you exactly why threatening a judge with budget cuts is the worst decision you can make. Judge Caprio's expression doesn't change, but his voice takes on a new edge. Councilman Duca, are you suggesting that your position on the Budget Committee should influence how I handle your parking violation? Duca, emboldened by years of getting away with intimidation, doubles down. Your Honor, I'm simply pointing out that we all work for the city, we all have roles to play. The Budget Committee makes funding recommendations. You preside over this courtroom. Perhaps we can find a resolution that acknowledges both our positions. That sounds like a threat, Councilman. Your Honor, Romano, the attorney, steps in smoothly. My client is simply noting the interconnected nature of city government. There's no threat implied, just an observation about institutional relationships. Judge Caprio leans back in his chair. Councilman Duca, let me ask you something. Do you remember a conversation you had on February 15th with Deputy Mayor Richard Santoro? Duca's confident expression falters slightly. Your Honor, I have many conversations with city officials. I don't recall specific dates. Let me refresh your memory. Judge Caprio pulls out a file folder. On February 15th at 2:47 p.m., you called Deputy Mayor Santoro from your City Hall office. Do you remember that conversation now? Duca's face starts to pale. Your Honor, I'm not sure how that's relevant to a parking ticket. Oh, it's very relevant, Councilman, because in that conversation, you discuss something very interesting. Judge Caprio opens the folder and pulls out a transcript. You told Deputy Mayor Santoro, and I quote, "Judge Caprio dismissed another one of my tickets last year. If he gives me any trouble this time, I'll make sure his court budget gets cut in half. That old fool needs to remember who controls the money." The courtroom erupts in shocked gasps. Duca looks like he's been punched in the stomach. Romano is frantically flipping through his briefcase. Your Honor, Duca's voice is shaky now. I don't know where you got that information, but I invoke my right to privacy. There is no right to privacy for conversations about bribing judges or threatening judicial independence. Councilman, Judge Caprio pulls out another document. Agent Morrison, could you join us, please? From the back of the courtroom, FBI Special Agent Morrison stands up and walks forward, pulling out her credentials. The atmosphere in the courtroom immediately shifts from routine to federal investigation. Councilman Duca, Judge Caprio continues. For the past 3 months, the FBI has been investigating corruption in Providence city government. You've been under surveillance the entire time. We have wiretap authorization for your office phone, your cell phone, and your City Hall office. What Judge Caprio reveals next will not only destroy Duca's political
career, but expose a network of corruption involving zoning bribes, contract rigging, and threats against anyone who opposed him. Agent Morrison opens her briefcase and pulls out a thick folder. Your Honor, our investigation has uncovered the following. Between January 2023 and March 2024, Councilman Duca accepted approximately $380,000 in bribes from developers and contractors seeking favorable zoning decisions and city contracts. The payments were disguised as consulting fees to a shell company Duca created called Urban Planning Advisors, LLC. She pulls out photographs. These are surveillance photos showing Councilman Duca meeting with developers and accepting cash envelopes at various restaurants throughout Providence. In exchange for these payments, Duca used his position as Budget Committee Chair to influence contract awards and push through zoning variances that benefited his paying clients. But that's not all, Morrison continues. Our wiretaps have also recorded Councilman Duca threatening at least 6 different city officials who opposed his corruption, including threatening to cut funding to departments, ruin careers, and in one case threaten physical harm to a city employee who discovered irregularities in contract bidding. Duca is visibly shaking now. The arrogance is completely gone. Your Honor, I want my attorney.
Attorney right here, Councilman. Judge Caprio's voice is cold. Now, let me play you something else you said when you thought nobody was listening. Judge Caprio presses a button on his computer, and a recording fills the courtroom. It's Duca's voice, clear and unmistakable, from a phone call made 2 weeks ago. Listen, Johnny, the judge thinks he's untouchable because he's popular. But I've got the votes on the Budget Committee. If Caprio doesn't play ball, we'll cut his court funding so deep he'll be working in a closet. These judges need to remember they work for us, not the other way around. And if that doesn't work, we'll find something in his past, make something up if we have to. Nobody threatens my operation and gets away with it. The courtroom is in complete chaos. People are gasping. Some are shouting. Romano looks like he wants to disappear. Duca is pale and sweating. Judge Caprio stops the recording. Councilman Duca, you just heard yourself threatening to fabricate evidence against a sitting judge because he wouldn't let you abuse your power. You threatened the independence of the judiciary. You attempted to corrupt the legal system itself. Duca tries to speak, but can't form words. Agent Morrison steps forward with handcuffs. Anthony Duca, you are under arrest for bribery of public officials, conspiracy to commit fraud, extortion, attempted intimidation of a judge, and corruption of public processes. You have the right to remain silent. As Morrison reads Duca his rights, 2 uniformed FBI agents enter the courtroom. Duca stands frozen, unable to process that his political career is ending in handcuffs in front of witnesses. Your Honor, please. Duca finally finds his voice. This is all a misunderstanding. I was just talking. I never actually did anything to you. Councilman, you attempted to corrupt judicial independence. You threatened to fabricate evidence against a judge. That's not just talking. That's a federal crime. But Judge Caprio isn't finished. What he reveals next shows just how deep Duca's corruption runs. Councilman Duca, I want you to know something. When you threatened me 2 weeks ago, when you said you'd cut my budget and destroy my reputation, you made a critical error. Judge Caprio stands up from his bench. You assumed I cared more about my budget than about justice. You assumed I could be intimidated. You assumed that because you'd gotten, if we get away with corruption for 12 years, you'd continue getting away with it. But what you didn't know
is that Judge Maria Santos, who sits in family court, came to me 6 months ago. Her brother works in the city planning department, and he noticed irregularities in contract awards that all seemed to benefit your shell company. She asked me to help investigate. Judge Caprio walks closer to the defendant's stand. So for 3 months, while you were threatening me, while you were planning how to destroy my career if I didn't bend to your corruption, I was working with the FBI, wearing a wire myself, gathering evidence against you. The phone call you made to me last month asking me to dismiss your previous tickets, I recorded it. Every threat, every attempt at intimidation, every corrupt bargain you proposed, all recorded and documented. Duca looks like he's going to be sick. The confident councilman who walked in 20 minutes ago is gone, replaced by a man realizing his entire life is about to collapse. Your Honor, I'll cooperate. I'll tell you everything. I'll testify against the others involved. I'll resign from the council. Please. Judge Caprio's expression is stern.
Councilman, the time for cooperation was before you became a criminal. The time for doing the right thing was before you accepted $380,000 in bribes. Now you'll face the consequences. And I hope those consequences include never holding public office again. As FBI agents begin to escort Duca toward the courtroom doors, Judge Caprio delivers his final statement to the disgraced politician. Councilman Duca, you said I was an old fool who needed to remember who controls the money, but you forgot something important about how our system works. Judges don't serve politicians. We serve the law and the Constitution. You can control budgets. You can threaten careers. You can use political power to intimidate people, but you cannot corrupt the judicial system, not in my courtroom. The officers lead Duca out. His expensive suit is rumpled. His perfect hair is disheveled. His Rolex will soon be seized as evidence. The powerful politician is gone, replaced by a defendant facing decades in federal prison. After Duca is removed, Judge Caprio addresses the courtroom, including several nervous-looking city officials in the gallery. Let this be a lesson to every elected official, every person in a position of power. Your political position doesn't place you above the law. Your budget authority doesn't give you the right to threaten judges. Your years in office don't grant you immunity from consequences. When you abuse power, when you take bribes, when you threaten the independence of the judiciary, you don't just break laws, you break the social contract that makes democratic government possible. Court is adjourned. The gavel comes down, and the story that started as a parking ticket has become the biggest political corruption scandal to hit Providence in 20 years. The aftermath of Duca's arrest created shockwaves throughout Providence city government. Within 48 hours, the FBI had arrested 4 more city officials connected to Duca's corruption network. The deputy mayor, 2 planning department officials, and another city councilman all faced federal charges. Within a week, the mayor held a press conference announcing a complete overhaul of city contracting procedures and the creation of an independent ethics commission. Duca's attorney, Vincent Romano, was investigated by the Rhode Island Bar Association for potential knowledge of his client's crimes. While not charged criminally, Romano's reputation was destroyed, and his practice collapsed. The investigation expanded rapidly. Developers who had paid bribes to Duca began to engage in secret negotiations with federal prosecutors in an effort to cooperate.
Cooperating with prosecutors. Bank records revealed that Duca had hidden over $600,000 in offshore accounts. Real estate holdings purchased with bribe money were identified and seized. The total corruption was staggering. Over 5 years, Duca had accepted more than $1.2 million in bribes, rigged dozens of city contracts, and threatened or intimidated at least 15 different people who had tried to expose his corruption. 6 months after his arrest, Anthony Duca stood in federal court for sentencing. He had pleaded guilty to 18 counts in exchange for prosecutors dropping some charges. His cooperation had helped expose other corrupt officials, but the evidence against him was overwhelming. The federal judge showed no mercy. "Mr. Duca," the judge said at sentencing, "you were elected to serve the people of Providence. Instead, you served yourself. You turned public office into a criminal enterprise. You threatened judges, intimidated witnesses, and corrupted the very institutions you swore to uphold." The judge sentenced Duca to 15 years in federal prison, forfeiture of $1.3 million in assets and illegal gains, permanent ban from holding public office, and restitution to the city of Providence of $800,000. Standing in court to hear his sentence, Duca was a broken
man. The confident councilman was gone. In his place stood a 47-year-old man facing 15 years in prison and the destruction of everything he'd built. "I convinced myself that everyone was doing it," Duca said in a brief statement. "I told myself that bribes and threats were just how politics worked. I was wrong. I betrayed my constituents, corrupted city government, and thought I could threaten a judge into submission. I destroyed my family, my career, and my freedom because of greed and arrogance." The video of Duca's arrest went viral, viewed over 6 million times in the first week. Political science courses began using it as a case study on political corruption. Ethics training programs for elected officials made it required viewing. Judge Frank Caprio's role in the investigation earned him national recognition. In interviews, he reflected on the case. "When Councilman Duca threatened me, when he said he'd cut my budget and ruin my career, he gave me 2 choices. I could be intimidated and let corruption continue, or I could stand up and fight back. The choice was easy. I took an oath to uphold the law. That oath doesn't have an exception for powerful politicians."
who threatened me. Judge Caprio continued, "The saddest part is that Duca could have been a good public servant. He was smart, charismatic, politically skilled, but he chose corruption over service. He chose bribes over integrity. And when someone tried to hold him accountable, he chose threats over accepting responsibility. That's not just criminal behavior. That's a fundamental betrayal of democratic governance." 5 years after his arrest, Anthony Duca sits in federal prison. His political career is over. His fortune is gone. His reputation is destroyed. The city council seat he held for 12 years is now occupied by a reform candidate who won on an anti-corruption platform. The officials he corrupted face their own consequences. Some went to prison, some resigned in disgrace, some cooperated with prosecutors and received reduced sentences. All of them learned that corruption, once exposed, tends to destroy everyone it touches. Providence city government implemented comprehensive reforms. All contract awards now go through independent review. Budget committee decisions require public disclosure. Ethics complaints are investigated by an independent commission with subpoena power, and threatening judges, even implicitly, became grounds for immediate recall of elected officials. The recording of Duca threatening Judge Caprio became legendary. In judicial circles, it's played in law schools to teach about judicial independence. It's used in political ethics courses to show what not to do. And it serves as a permanent reminder that some judges refuse to be intimidated no matter how much political power you think you have. Judge Caprio, who presided over the hearing that exposed Duca's corruption, continued serving with distinction. When asked about memorable cases, he always mentioned Duca, not for the drama, but for the principle it represented. Judicial independence isn't just a legal concept. It's the foundation of our democracy. When politicians think they can threaten judges, intimidate courts, and corrupt the legal system, they're not just breaking laws. They're attacking the very idea that all people, even powerful politicians, are equal under the law. Councilman Duca thought his political position made him untouchable. He thought budget authority gave him power over judges. He thought 12 years of getting away with corruption meant he'd continue getting away with it. He was wrong on all counts. Today, when Providence politicians consider using their positions for personal gain, many of them remember Anthony Duca. They remember the councilman who thought he could threaten a judge and instead ended up in federal prison for 15 years. They remember the wiretap recording of Duca planning to destroy Judge Caprio's career played back in open court before his arrest. They will never forget that corruption always collapses under its own arrogance, that intimidation and abuse of power carry consequences no one can escape. And above all, they will remember the voice of Judge Frank Caprio, calm, unwavering, and rooted in justice. You can manipulate budgets, you can threaten careers, you can bend politics to your will, but you will never corrupt the courts. Not in my courtroom, not while I sit on this bench. Those weren't just words. They were a declaration, a defense of democracy itself. Because what Judge Caprio protects isn't just law, it's trust, honor, and the soul of justice. Anthony Duca learned, as every corrupt official eventually does, that threatening a judge doesn't make you powerful. It makes you accountable. And Judge Frank Caprio ensured that lesson would echo across Providence and beyond. Because in a world where power often shields wrongdoing, he reminds us that true strength is measured not by fear, but by fairness. Not by influence, but by integrity. So if you still believe that justice must stand taller than politics, subscribe to Case Closed and join us in honoring Judge Frank Caprio, a man who didn't just serve the law, he sanctified it.